I'm really enjoying it. I'm like, oh, good. You want to watch me play more of this? Thank you very much.
You like Bowser? You better like
Hell
Bowser.
Yeah. Let's do this.
That's sweet. That is just such a cool. Yeah, I wish they did that with, like, again, with Tropical Freeze. Like, they could have just added a bonus world or something.
Yeah.
I know it's not that easy to just design new levels, but
right.
It seems
but they
like
charge 60 bones
exactly.
for that,
if you're gonna go ask full price, if you're gonna ask full price, you better give me something to entice me to want to buy it again.
Funky Kong mode.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with Randall Nolery.
Hey folks.
And we are back as a two-pack, missing John this evening. Once again, I feel like we've been had a little bit of scheduling, not necessarily conflicts per se, but just everyone's been busy and
lifestyle
running around. Yeah, people have been sick. It's it's tough to coordinate schedules all the time, but glad we were able to sync up for another podcast session. It's been a while since, again, the last session that I sat down and recorded was just with John and I.
Yeah.
So, we kind of went off the beaten path, talked about like some, kind of leaned into the multiplayer stuff that we had been doing recently. But I know you've been kind of wrapping up some stuff on Nintendo. We've both been kind of spending some time on Nintendo Switch as of late.
Yeah.
Playing a bunch of games. But I know we talked about Kirby and the Forgotten Land probably a couple months ago, not like right when it came out, but John and I had probably... And John and I had both completed the game, or at least come pretty close to it at that point. And I know you had like pretty much started it, but not really gotten too deep into it yet, and shared some kind of like, more like first impressions. But I know you have done some more digging into the Forgotten Land as of late.
Yeah. So a real catalyst for my playing of some more Nintendo stuff. I had been like not stuck because I've been enjoying it, but I've been on way more on my Xbox Series X than my Switch just generally this year with the releases that have happened. Obviously Elden Ring and other things, but and Game Pass games and whatever else. And just like the tangent, but like even just watching things through video apps, like the Xbox has all of them and the Switch doesn't.
It's like your entertainment system all in one. That's like how my PS3 was back when I lived with DJ and my old roommate. Like it was just like, this is the thing I'm on all the time, and because of that was where I played games all the time too, because it was just like the default HDMI input that we were on, and it was just, everything was just default set up, ready to go at any time. And I will, not to totally sidetrack, but somebody in our Discord recently was sharing some footage. They've been digging into Lonely Mountains Downhill on their Xbox Series X, and I had they just posted even just in the Discord, I don't know how it compresses the videos in there or whatever, but I was just I had been playing it on Switch recently, and I was just like, yo, what platform are you playing this on? I assumed they were maybe on PC with maxed out settings or something like that. And they're like, oh, I'm on the Xbox Series X. And I was like, man, I was playing that even on my Xbox One before. And this is like night and day.
Oh,
and I know you've mentioned it on the podcast before, it's going to be a game changer. Cause I know I've teased I got to upgrade, but that clip is probably the most I've ever been enticed, because Lonely Mountains Downhill is already it's low poly, but it's a really nice looking game.
Oh, yeah.
And holy, they posted a clip of one of their nighttime rides with just the flashlight, and it's just this is almost a different game. I mean, it's at night, especially after just playing it on Switch, where it still plays great and runs fine, but it's a little chunky and a little, it's not the perfect situation.
Right. Where you're getting max visuals and just butter gameplay and frame rates on.
It was
on
the smoothest
Xbox
video clip I've ever seen in my life. I was just like, this is crazy. So it definitely made me think again, especially because most of my Xbox gaming is done through Game Pass, so it's not like I'm really spending a bunch of money on games.
No, you don't need to.
So it's just I kind of just want to have essentially a PC that is a console sitting off to the side here.
It's 100% what the new Xbox Series systems are, and it's the quick resume, man. The quick resume, is amazing. You were just talking about that, And so I'm assuming quick resume is virtually the same thing as when you. Much faster, but when you put a game on the home screen on Switch, and you can kind of put the Switch to sleep and boot it back up, correct.
but it's just way faster than that, I guess.
Plus, you can essentially do that. You're idling / clamshelling. Like I've been up to like 6 or 7 games at a time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I did not realize there was some shuffle. Like you can have more than one at once.
Yeah.
That is a game changer.
Where it's only one game and it forces you to close it. No.
That's a game changer.
It's amazing.
There's a lot of times where I'm just like, oh, I kind of want to I don't want to exit out of this game. Or like I don't want I'm done playing for now, but I haven't hit a checkpoint. So like I'll either end up grinding and getting frustrated to hit the next checkpoint or save point, or I'll stop and then like when I go to play again, I'm like, I don't want to replay that stuff. That is a game changer.
It's a huge game changer, let alone that the new, I'm just selling this Xbox now. The new Xbox controller has like the shared button there. It's not hidden in some menu. So then you just hold it down for a couple of seconds to do the whatever 2-minute or 30-second clip, whatever you define it as. And then it exports that. And that's what you saw as an output that someone shared in the Discord, right? And it's so easy. It is. It's just a PC. It's a Microsoft PC that's like streamlined and hooked up to your TV, and it rules. It's like I probably turn on my Xbox every day, not necessarily just a game, but to like watch stuff on or whatever else. It's just that like multimedia device.
Well, again, too, I'd love to have that, too, because I do find myself switching between, like, I have, like, an Amazon Fire Stick hooked up to, like, my receiver, but it's on, a different HDMI port. Right. Otherwise, I'm usually running all my game consoles, like, through my capture card, which then goes through to the same output. So I'm just kind of swapping cables most of the time, which is tedious and annoying in its own right, but it just is, because I'm recording stuff all the time and whatever, it's like, it's just the way I have it set up. But I would love if included in that if I could just not have to like go and switch the HDMI on my TV and go because then sometimes I'm like I'll just be sitting there like troubleshooting for a while like why don't I have any audio, and then I'm like, oh, I didn't switch it to the the different input on my receiver even though I switched it on the TV, or sometimes just the HDMI cables like it just doesn't like talk to each other right. So like I gotta just like turn off the TV and turn it back on, and then now I have sound.
Sometimes if one thing turns on before the other in a weird way,
it seems like it's like an order of operations thing where it's just like it doesn't register. It didn't know it was on beforehand, so now it's never on.
Right.
It's weird how the receivers and I think there's just weird stuff with like different brands and some things just are more compatible. I definitely need to get some new HDMI cables. I'm still using my like Wii U HDMI cable to like swap out. It's like starting to crackle on like the ends. Like I definitely need to just get like a nice new upgrade with some gold those connectors and stuff.
Those cables are thankfully pretty cheap and mainstream these days. And pretty future proof too. Like you could get ones that are obviously say they're rated for 4K 120 or whatever and still use them on your Switch and be perfectly fine or whatever.
Yeah, and HDMI has been kind of the standard for a
forever.
pretty long time now. Yeah, it seems like it's not going anywhere.
Mid Xbox 360 days, because the first Xbox 360 didn't have an HDMI port, and then they updated the model to include it. Yeah,
that's like back to our Best Buy days when the HDMI, because I remember like cables were like $100 or like
man,
it was one of the few things where like our discount really came into play. Where like the consoles we literally would get no discount on, or the games maybe $5 or something, but like a controller or a cable or something, it's like, oh man, this is like 90% off or something.
Because all that margin.
Yeah, because you need it. Like, okay, you got the system and the HD TV, but if you really want to get the use out of it, you got to buy this cable. You don't need to buy the TV or the console, but you need to buy. If you own both of those things, then you do need the cable. So they know how to get you.
You don't want that to be the bottleneck, do you? You don't know that this $10 cable does the exact same thing as this $100 cable we're trying to sell you.
Right. Oh, monster cables!
Not to turn this whole thing into a save it for the cast.
And the fact that we're like leaning into Nintendo, and now we're going like, oh, let's talk some Xbox here.
You know what I really like is that Xbox.
I love it. That's what you get when you get a duo episode of Pursuing Pixels. I
know. Yeah, no, I was supposed to talk about Kirby and the Forgotten Land because, like Kevin had set me up before, I had gotten back to playing Switch more despite playing Xbox every day or turning it on every day because I have a daughter who's 3, going to be turning 4 who, there's lots of, obviously the fun, bright color and, family friendly stuff is more often found on the Nintendo platform as opposed to certainly some of that stuff's on Xbox, but not the same way it is on Nintendo, certainly.
Yeah.
And, I obviously, I love fun, colorful things too. So it's, totally fine. And so I'm like, oh yeah, this is a perfect excuse to go back to Kirby and the Forgotten Land, especially because I've got a couple of amiibos. I've got like the Kirby amiibo and the DDD amiibo. So she asked like, What are these? What are these? And like, oh, Kirby. Like, and then so she's like, can put all that together and like, what are those guys? Oh, those are Waddle Dees and they're friends and stuff.
Yeah, now it's like, oh, these characters that are like in our house are also on the TV screen.
Exactly.
It's just kind of cool.
Yeah. So she's not even at a point where she's like interacting with a controller or anything, but she's watching me play, which, my wife Tina had a good point. It's like, oh yeah, that's literally what the youths, that's what they do. Like that Twitch is a massive thing, and it's just watching people play video games. Like, that's
it's kind of like watching a cartoon, with a little less story, I guess, going on, but there's still even little bits. So
yeah, exactly. So she's so content to do that, and I'm like, that allowed me to rip through the rest of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, besides a couple of other nighttime sessions that I threw in there too, because then I was like, okay, I'm hooked back on this game. And
nice.
I, amongst the three of us, had the most positive impression of it in the first place, and so I was happy to see it through and see the credits. And I just really, this is one of my more favorable Kirby games that I've played, and for the same reasons I explained before. It's that more like corridor style 3D gameplay, or down a path like a Galaxy, or like things like I've talked about before, like a Gauntlet Legends style, where it is 3D, but it's within this very like limited framework, and it's very directed. And that's the approach I like, and they carried that through. And all like the mouthful mode stuff of like the car and all the silly things you can control, it was a lot of fun, I thought. And the optional like kind of the Star Road style bonus levels that can get pretty difficult to get those extra bonus stars to upgrade your abilities, which all of them seemingly can upgrade to like 3 tiers at least. And they all look different in each one of those tiers, and even have like slightly different abilities as you upgrade them too, which I thought was more than they even had to do. So I like it. Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a game that I like quite a bit, and I'm pretty happy to have in the collection, and happy to have seen through. And there's even those bonus levels afterwards.
Like
I
that
played
extra
one or two
world
of them.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
I think I did the same. I think I played a couple levels. I don't think I finished them all for whatever reason.
They're
and
a little bit long, the bonus levels. And then I'm like, I couldn't quite figure out how to get back to them at a glance.
Yeah, I do remember the world map being sort of like way more spread out than it needed to be in like the whole game. It's like, this could have been a little more concise or whatever. But once you mentioned that you were playing it again, it did kind of have me thinking, because I know I kind of was like, kind of the main complaint I've been kind of leveraging at a lot of Nintendo games lately, and I feel like a broken record, but I'm just like, I feel like a lot of the stuff is like spectacle and set piece, like where it's like when you're playing it again the second time, and not that you necessarily need to be designing a game to be played a second time, but like when I'm able to go back and play Super Mario World for like the 30th time and still have just as much fun, if not more, than I've ever had with it, where I'm like, even already on the first playthrough of Kirby, I'm already thinking like, I wonder if this would even be fun to play again. Yeah. And even like playing Tropical Freeze, when I was talking about that recently, I was just kind of like, man, like some of those minecart levels that I remember the first time around being like, oh my God, that was insane. Like now this time I'm just kind of like, oh, that was cool. But like now it's kind of annoying because I just have to hit all the jumps perfectly.
Right. Memorize it to some degree, retro style,
Yeah, and thankfully Kirby doesn't have that going on. It's more like just exploring. And again, once you mentioned that you were kind of digging into it, I was like, I wonder if I've had enough distance between finishing it up and like, because I didn't feel compelled right away to just be like, okay, let me 100% and go, going for all the extra objectives. But I definitely didn't not like the game. It just kind of didn't like fully pull me in and like leave that lasting impression. But it did, like even you just bringing it up that you were playing it again was enough to have me thinking like, oh, maybe I should fire it up again. Because there really are like, it's such a fun world to be in.
Oh, yeah.
I really, like, as soon as you brought it up, I immediately started thinking about, like, some of, like, the kind of water-themed levels where, like, Kirby's, like, again, like, that corridor perspective where you're kind of, like, almost, like, going down, like, it's not as intense as like Whitewater Rapids, you know, but the water's kind of carrying you forward along the screen, and you're just dodging obstacles. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. And all the different mouthful mode sequences were really cool.
It's just simple, fun, streamlined, platformer game. And it's and most of the time it's not too difficult, but it can be a little bit more difficult if you want it to be, and that's cool too. So I just like it. It's just a fun game to kick back with, and like the whole like post-apocalyptic thing is a really fun juxtaposition with a character like Kirby in a world like Kirby. So that's cool
just
too.
Like some real like kind of real world-esque things, like kind of New Donk City sort of style,
or like Pikmin-ish to some degree that way too, right? So
that's a good point. Yeah. And I forget if you mentioned it before when we talked about it, but did you and Tina get to play any co-op in this one at all, or just a little bit?
A little bit. Yeah. I think we played like 1 or 2 levels where she was the Waddle Dee that could do some like helicopter attacks and things like that. So that was fun too. Like that. Yeah. That's cool that's available. And certainly when Fiona gets a little bit older, I could easily see us popping this game back in and playing some levels that way in that mode.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. You got my interest peaked, and at least in the sense of like, finishing off those like bonus levels, or going back for some of because usually there was like 5 or 6 different like challenges on each stage, and usually I would end up getting like
or whatever, per stage, to get the Waddle Dees, and then because sometimes they wouldn't even tell you how to get necessarily all of those like hidden Waddle Dees, but then like they'd start kind of leaving you little breadcrumbs of like, okay, this is what you need to do now that you've beat the level once. We'll show you a couple more of the challenges that you might. Yeah,
it's sort of like revealed a little bit, and I do feel like that stuff would be like, again, perfect for like a co-op replay or whatever, or even a first play. Just kind of like it tends to be more fun to kind of like poke around and explore a level like that in a co-op setting, where like for me, I don't know, when I'm playing a single player game, I'm just like, I just want to rip through and like get from point A to point B, and depending on the type of game,
that's not me. I'm always poking around at the edges for whatever reason.
I very much used to be that way, but I think I think I've said it before on the podcast too, but Breath of the Wild, as soon as it was like 900 Korok seeds, I was just like, it's not happening.
Well,
so
no,
it's like, it kind of broke me.
No. I never saw that as a challenge I needed to do. It was always in Breath of the Wild, like, if I come across them or I see something that looks weird, I'll check it out. I'm not ever going to collect all 900. That's not in the cards. I'm not even going to approach that.
But I feel like I've been able to carry that, for whatever reason, that like kind of like stuck in my brain enough to where I've just been able to carry that into a lot of games. Like even, I guess I'll carry over to, I won't talk about this game much, but just since it's another game from Hal Laboratories, and a series that doesn't get a ton of love, the BOXBOY series. Yeah. And in particular, this is the 4th game in the series. We had to like double check that before we were recording. Like, how many of these are there?
I know.
And it's actually called BOXBOY and BOXGIRL. Yeah. I believe all 3 of the previous games came out on the 3DS. The first one might have even been on like the DSi or DS Lite. I think it was 3DS though.
I think they're all in 3DS. That's a good question.
I'm pretty sure about that as well, but I do know that BOXBOY and BOXGIRL was the first game that came out on like consoles and Switch and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's also the first game in the series that had 2-player co-op as well.
Nice.
And the other day, I know we talked about recently on the podcast that DJ John and I got together and did some co-op gaming and just multiplayer gaming and whatnot in general. And during that session, DJ actually left his sunglasses over here. So a couple days later, he was like, hey, can I come back over and pick those up and we'll grab some breakfast? And I was like, hey, you want to play some games for a little bit? And he reminded me, like, we might have even talked about this on the podcast like years ago. But he reminded me, he was like, hey, did we ever finish that BOXBOY and BOXGIRL campaign? And I was like, you know what? I don't think we did. And we booted it up. We were on World 11 when we booted it up. It looked like there was maybe World 12 as well. After that, we kind of cleared that next world. And I actually ended up playing a little bit more. I've slowly been kind of chipping away at the single-player campaign. There's just 2 fully separate campaigns in the game, which is kind of cool.
Oh, my God. That's fantastic.
You can play the 2-player campaign single player, but it does feel like it even says it's like this is recommended for 2 players, but it does feel like it's doable with 1 player, but there are definitely times where you feel like you want to say you would definitely just need to kind of like do timing oriented things where it seems like it would be tough to like you're kind of like, okay, you're going to because there is like a, I don't know if this mechanic was in the previous games, but essentially you it's like a 2D side-scrolling puzzle platformer, and you're essentially able to like hold down a button, and you literally play as almost like a little square, like essentially a pixel, or like you're the size of like a tile in the game. Right. And then on each level, you're able to like extend your body like a certain number of tiles in any direction, up, down, left, or right. Your first extension can't be down, I don't think, because that would like go straight into the ground.
Right.
But if you're like extending, like basically you're like either like reaching up and then making like a little like L Tetris shape, so you can like latch onto like a
Tetris type of configurations a little bit. Yeah.
And you're like making blocks to like either like throw and like trigger a switch so that you can, you know, leave that box there and then open a gate that you can jump through, or build a staircase that you can climb up and reach a certain height. Or again, you can almost use it like it almost works like a grappling hook if you're able, like some stages will only let you use like 3 blocks maximum at a time. Some stages will let you use like 7. So if you can use 7, you're able to like extend that like all the way across a gap. And if it can touch solid ground on the other side, then it like kind of locks to that place. And then if you like hit the extend button again, I don't know, I was going to say de-extend, I don't know if that makes sense, but like if you hit that button again, you like kind of get sucked to like the point that you're latched to, as opposed to like if you're not latched to a point, then you'll just kind of like retract back into itself.
Yeah, like a measuring tape type of deal.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. Yeah. And it's really kind of is interesting because like it's very interesting, kind of back to that 100%ing things, like playing with DJ, like on each level, there's like a crown. Sometimes there's 2 hidden crowns. They're not even necessarily hidden. They're just kind of challenging to get. Right. But then there's also like a series of challenges to get like a ranking on each stage for using like a certain number of boxes or fewer. And to get like a 1 star, it's like this. And then it keeps going lower and lower. And like DJ is very much like the type of player that's like, we got to get all the things and get everything and get all the crowns and like get the, even like on some of the stages we were playing where it's like clearly like we're clearly going to end up using way less than the number of allotted boxes. Like he still needs to figure out like the most minimal way to do it. And I'm like, we already got it. So it's been like really kind of enjoyable. Like I really have enjoyed both sessions with the game, but like it's been really enjoyable to go back and start, because I wasn't anywhere near as far in the single player campaign. I think I was only on world like 4 or 5. So it's been really fun to kind of go back and play more my style. Like I'm still going for the crowns and going for the rankings, but I really have, honestly, especially on the single player, it's a lot harder because you can kind of like in 2-player, you can kind of cheese the mechanics, because if you don't actually set the boxes down, they don't actually count. So like a lot of times you can like extend a bridge for the other player to walk across, but if you never release the button, if you kind of keep it held down and then retract it back into yourself before you ever like activate those boxes, they don't count towards your total.
It's like a temporary bridge at that point. Yeah.
So because that's a mechanic, and it almost feels like, to me, it feels like all like the allotted goals, like they're not expecting you to do that mechanic, maybe in like one, like to clear 1 gap or something, but they're not expecting you to like cheese that mechanic from beginning to end of each stage. And again, playing with DJ, it was like, that was definitely his mindset of like, we got to use as few boxes as possible. And so it's been really enjoyable to kind of go back and play the stages. Like I'm kind of in like the laser section where you got to kind of like figure out how to place boxes in a position to block the lasers that are blasting at you. And it's just really simple. I will say it looked a lot better on the 3DS. Like it's a really like simplistic looking game that it almost looks a little boring and bland playing it on a big screen. Like it loses a little something not having like that lower resolution on like a pixelated 3DS screen or whatever. Right. But it doesn't look bad or anything. It's just it definitely like I don't think you'd be scrolling through the eShop and immediately, unless you saw the mechanics in action, you probably wouldn't see this game and think, ooh, I got to check that out.
That makes sense.
I'd say it is that kind of game though. If you do like kind of like a thinking puzzle game, like it is a puzzle platformer, but you're not doing any finesse platforming at all. It's very much like it's pretty rigid in that regard. Like you do have to like, okay, my character can jump exactly 1 tile height. It can jump, like you're not able to like really cheese anything on like, oh, I can like kind of slip off the ledge and barely cross that gap. It's like if your character is not meant to jump across that gap, you're not going to make it in any way.
No, it's almost like a, I don't know, like a logical platformer or something.
Yeah,
it's
Yeah.
It's cool. The whole BOXBOY series is gold and very cool to check out, and almost entirely on 3DS. And like we mentioned before, they should do a compilation. Honestly,
yeah, I would love to see that. Yeah, because it feels like, again, just Nintendo every now and then, whether it's like with Part-Time UFO, another game from Hal. I kind of forgot that that's from them too. But like we were talking about the Pushimo series earlier too, and it's like they have all these like little weird like downloadable like. I was going to say one-off games, but they're not one-off games. They're like full-blown series with like 3 or 4 games each in them. So it definitely feels like it would be a shame for those to be like forgotten on the 3DS or Wii U eShops.
Hell puts the love in to their games, that's for sure.
Yeah, they really do. Through. They really do, yeah. And I guess just for another like kind of brain-bending puzzle game that I've been playing lately, also on Switch, although not from anyone Nintendo related, but this game is called She Remembered Caterpillars. It's a game that great name and a pretty great game. Again, only if you're looking for like a brain teaser. Like this game is breaking my brain. I think I'm on the 20th level as I just played like maybe another 4 or 5 levels. And I'm at a point where like, it's like single screen. Like you can see the whole level, kind of top down perspective. And it's got a really beautiful aesthetic. Like it's very like, I don't know if it's hand drawn, hand painted or whatever, but it's very like hand drawn animation. Nice. Like everything feels really like fluid. Like, I don't know. Everything just has like a really nice, clean, really cool looking animation. It doesn't look like a typical video game, but you kind of play as like these little like Pikmin-esque like fungus creatures that, and the gameplay is not necessarily like Pikmin. You kind of like control one character at a time. And then you use the shoulder buttons to like swap between them. And when the game starts out, you're kind of like these little like fungus creatures or whatever. They just kind of remind me of like little mushrooms, but they're like, and at the very beginning, I think they're just red and blue. You have like a red head and a blue head one, and they just kind of like, and they do a pretty good job with the accessibility. Like if there's any color blindness going on, like if you're not able to recognize the creatures from the colors, like the red is like a circle and the blue is a square. I forget which ones are which, but like I know I read something about the game where I know they've like thought a lot about that stuff. I still feel like it would be kind of confusing because like as you get further into the game, they start introducing. So now you got red and blue and yellow. So you got the primary colors. And then once you have all those colors involved, so like if you get 2 characters next to each other, the red and blue, you can press a button that actually they like dive into one another and merge together and then become a purple mushroom. So this is where I feel like it would become kind of difficult. Like you can see, so like those 2 colors are like a square and a circle. And it does make it where it's like flat on the bottom and rounded on the top. But I still feel like some of the stuff you kind of have to know, like these colors go together, and you kind of would have to know some of that stuff, I feel. But I do feel like it's worth mentioning that they made a ton of effort to try to make it accessible. Yeah. Even if you do, you're not able to recognize the creatures or whatever from the color. But basically, at least from as far as I've got, there's like different bridges and then gates. And the gates will not let a character, like, if you're a blue character, you can't walk across a blue gate. But if you're a blue character, you can walk across a blue bridge. Okay. So if you're a purple character, you can also walk across that blue bridge because you have blue in your part of your pigment or whatever. Yeah. Same thing goes, you cannot walk through the gate because you do have blue mixed in there. And it really ends up being like, again, I'm on like the 20th stage right now. And they've now introduced like a few different colors, few different mechanics. And there's even a mechanic that I haven't seen yet, but I know you can actually like step on these like things that will like actually suck the color out of your little fungus creature. And then like you become like kind of like a little naked, like just white creature. And I don't know what kind of like mechanics will come into play with that. Or maybe you can like re-dye yourself like a different color. Ooh. I really don't know, but
that would make sense.
You really are like running around in circles, like not running around because it's not like you can take as much time as you want, but you really like, there's so many steps to each puzzle where like, it almost feels like I like stumble into them at this point where I'm like, okay, I got to bring like this character over here. You got to like almost like merge them all together in one kind of meeting place. Cause there'll be like, again, all those different bridges and gates. And then occasionally even like 2 switches that you have to like have both switches stepped on that will then open another like colorless bridge that anyone can walk across. Yep. But then you got to really figure out, okay, I need that to be like one of the yellow ones over there, like so that once I get this red one across the bridge, it has to be a non-blue so that it can go through the gate. And there's just like even when there's only a few characters in play on the screen or on a given stage, you really, really have to think. Like, there are times where I almost feel like I'm repeating the same motions, but I'm definitely not. Like, I'm making like one little chip away at the solution. Like, okay, now I got both of the blues over here. Okay, now I gotta do that kind of same, like, rinse and repeat the same motion, but like to get the other character over here as well. And like, it's just a really cool, really clever, really beautiful game. And I kind of ended up going in this direction because I've been doing some streams recently where I was playing like some action-packed, like twitchy. I was actually playing some Lonely Mountains Downhill that I talked about for a quick second earlier. And like, as much as I love that game, like, I would honestly put it in my top 10 games of all time. Not even the top 10%. Like, just amazing.
Yeah.
But I was kind of like, it just wasn't hitting the right mood that I was in for that moment. I was like, I've been really enjoying playing these games that are like more methodical and like I'm thinking. I don't know how they are to watch because I feel like I'm just sitting there going, what about this?
Yeah.
But it's like perfect energy for when I'm just like, I just want to end it. Like, sometimes people will like chime in and like have a little like tip, hey, try this, or I don't know. It's just been a really fun like change of pace because I do tend to like gravitate towards like the twitchy arcadey stuff, and especially when I do tend to go for like a stream, I'm like, let me play something that I'm familiar with and action packed and whatever. It's been kind of nice to like, fire up some of these more like thought driven games.
Teaser,
I guess.
Yeah. That's kind of that's extra pressure on you when you're live on a stream too, you know, to try and solve it.
Well, for example, and I'll save this for an episode when John's around because I know that he's been digging into the new Into the Breach update as well.
Yeah,
but that's one that I kind of, and part of the reason was like, well, I was kind of like, well, I'm not gonna like make these into a video or anything, so I'm just gonna like full blown like actually just have like a chill stream. Like, I'm not doing anything with this after the fact. Like, I left the fan on because it was a just beautiful day outside.
Sure.
And I ended up just playing like, just digging into that new update. And I ended up I think I've done like 4 or 5 Into the Breach streams now because I was just like, I'm kind of addicted to this game again. But like I said, I'll wait till John gets back. And who knows, maybe you'll even get a chance to dig back into that
about
one.
It for sure. Yeah.
It's got the hooks in me bad. Now, I just said earlier, I was like, maybe I'm not going to bring my Switch home with me on this trip. And now I'm like, but Into the Breach.
Into the Breach.
But a game that I ended up playing on a stream after that, because as much as I was enjoying the vibe of Into the Breach, I was kind of like, man, there's almost like too much thinking in all of these turns. Like, I got to be like, okay, do I want to do this? Okay, actually, no. Now that I went through all the motions with all 3 mechs, actually, I don't think I want to do that. Let me reset the turn and do that over again. So I was like, there's almost like too much thinking in this right now for what I was in the mood for this particular day. So I ended up doing a stream of this game called Undergrave. And I've talked about Undergrave on the podcast in passing after I checked out the demo. This is from Wired Dream Studios, but it's another. I'm just a huge fan of all their games. They made Red Ronin, Raven's Hike. I've raved about a bunch of their games on the podcast. Frog is another one that I think I've talked about on the podcast. I know I've streamed that one as well. And that's familiar. The Undergrave and Frog were kind of like in development at the same time. Frog is coming out still. Like, I think they were working on it as like a game jam project. And then they were like, oh, wait, this is kind of sweet.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually flesh this into a full video game.
Yeah.
And kind of like dump their focus into finishing that up and making a demo for it. And then wrapped up things on Undergrave. And again, I talked about this one briefly, but I did want to dig into the mechanics a little bit deeper because it's got a really cool just like it's another like turn-based tactics game, and it is a roguelike where it's got permadeath and all that stuff.
Nice.
But it feels like just like Into the Breach, it's like every single decision you make matters. It's one of those games where like everything costs a certain amount of action points, but other than just moving regular style and you're just moving like one tile at a time, up, down, left, right, top, down perspective. But then moving one tile over actually recharges your action points. And then otherwise you're able to either throw your sword that's kind of your main mode of attack. You're able to either throw your sword or jump and then kind of like land like from above, like on top of enemies.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or you're able to kind of like dash, like almost like across the screen. You kind of have a range, so you don't necessarily go all the way across the screen, but you use the dash and you go up, down, left, or right. So you might be able to like chain through two enemies and slice them both down.
That's nice.
And you're doing a lot of decision making where like once you throw the sword, you hit an enemy. It kind of works more like Tower Fall or something, where like you have to recollect your sword after you've thrown it, but you're able to utilize it in certain ways where like, okay, you've thrown it and hit this enemy, but now if like an enemy ends up on the same tile as the sword, or even if they're like maybe a tile beyond the sword, but I can then do my dash mechanic even though I don't have the sword in my hand, and then along the way pick up the sword and slash through the enemy all in the same movement, and it's so satisfying. And then on top of that, so a dash typically costs 3 action points, a jump is 4 action points, and a throw is 2 action points. But then once you've thrown the sword, then a jump is only 2 action points, and a dash is only 1 action point. And you're kind of constantly like juggling, okay, do I want to like throw the sword? It's just like every single decision, even if it's just moving up, down, left, or right, like it just feels like the AI is always really smart. Like every time when you think like you're like, haha, I'm gonna kite him into this and then I'm gonna chain him up, like you're like, they never chain up in the way that you think they're going to like stupidly walk into like one of your plans. You're just like, oh no, they almost always like find a way around it and like spread out in a way that keeps you like, it's not full blown. Again, part of the reason why I was enjoying it so much is because it wasn't quite on that level of Into the Breach thinking. Like I was still able to almost feel like I was playing it like an action game, even though it was turn-based. But like you get into a fluid, like you just learn the rules. Like it's just really well, like everything's very readable. You start to learn, okay, as soon as you learn like how the enemies behave, but okay, this enemy can move 2 tiles at a time and only takes 1 damage. This enemy takes 2 damage, but can only move 1 tile at a time. Like it's just really
right. And you have X amount of action points to spend. So how do I want to allocate them, knowing that I have those type of enemies potentially in my line of attack? Right.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'll say is really cool too, because like, so I cleared like the first biome, and it kind of seemed like it worked a little bit more like how the structure works in Going Under. Which is a game that I've talked about before on the podcast too. And it's a roguelike, but it's almost like each dungeon is like its own like world that you have to clear in and of itself. Like, so when you boot the game or when you start a run, you actually start now that I've made it to the second biome, I can actually pick to start from either the first or the second biome. I don't know if you're just trying to beat them all individually or if you need to clear them all to like finish a total run to see the credits or whatever. Or if you're able to say, maybe it's even just for speedrunning purposes of like, hey, I'm going to skip the whole first dungeon. I don't need the upgrades. Because to me, I feel like it's almost still better to play that first dungeon because every like, I think throughout that like first floor or dungeon or whatever, you end up hitting like 3 altars where you get to pick a few different upgrades that
to keep on your run. Yeah.
So it's like, is it better to start from the second, because the enemies are they're not way tougher, but there's definitely tougher. I did dive into a run of just starting right from that second floor, and it didn't feel immediately overwhelming, but it definitely, I got the impression of like, at least the way I'm going to play is probably still try to clear them all in order. But maybe as I get like more familiar, if I get like really good at it or something, and I'm just like, okay, this first floor is just tedious, maybe I will just skip it. But it's an incredible game. It's probably my favorite game from Wired Dreams. Thiago is the name of the developer as well. I will say that the demo of Frog is shaping up to maybe replace this one. Like it's another turn-based roguelike, but more of like, it's got like platforming, like Dandara style mechanics, but also like super hot freeze time. Like it's amazing. Like the demo just really blew me away. Again, I talked about that on the podcast before too. I'm pretty much just a huge fan of all the games that they're making over there at Wired Dreams. And it's kind of impressive because a lot of their games, like Red Ronin uses like that kind of that dash mechanic where you're just pressing like up, down, left, or right, and you go like all the way through until you hit a wall or whatever. Kind of more like Cyber Protocol that we always use as like a frame of reference for that, like up, down, left, or right till you like hit an obstacle or whatever.
Right.
But it is like,
or whatever.
Yeah, they're just so good at making these like turn-based games that still feel actiony and like you feel like you have a lot of like, you're able to like finesse your way around certain scenarios in some ways, or at least it feels like it. I don't know. It just feels so much more like interactive and engaging than a typical turn-based game does. And I really loved it. Like, I really loved the demo, and going back into it again was just like, oh, this is every bit as good as I remembered, and one that I'm looking forward to hopefully beating if I'm able to.
Yeah.
But yeah, a good, nice, like, similar flavor of Into the Breach, but just like a little less. You just have one unit to worry about. You don't have to think about the positioning of three
Right.
different units and mechs and abilities and new abilities getting added to the mix. It's kind of like, okay, just worry about this one thing and lean into the new abilities you get along the way. And
I could see that being more like streamlined and actiony just from that alone, though. That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's even got it's got two different control setups where there's like a methodical version of the control scheme where it's more like you're like picking your thing and then confirming it. And then it's got the like action version of the controls where it's like you're kind of like, you hit the same button to kind of confirm or if you hit dash, it just dashes in whatever direction you press, as opposed to like hitting dash, then picking a direction, then committing. No, it's like once you get it down, okay, boom, let's go. Boom. And it really does make it feel more like an action arcade game. So
yeah, that's sweet.
It's awesome. Yeah. And again, any game that like really makes you feel like you want to like pump another quarter in the machine and say one more run, if you're making a roguelike, and you got the hooks in me for sure. So
oh yeah. Love roguelikes.
Yeah. But I know we wanted to do a little more Nintendo talk before we wrap up the episode this evening.
Yeah. So, back on the subject of Nintendo Switch games and playing something while my toddler daughter watches, decided, she's been into the amiibos that I've been setting out as we've been getting more of our house set up more and more. And, Bowser and Mario and some of these characters have come up, and she's like, I want to see a game with Bowser. I'm like, oh yeah, a game with Bowser. Okay, huh? And I'm like, oh, maybe Mario Kart. And she was okay with that, but she kind of thought it was boring after a little while. I'm like, I was like, okay, maybe I know in Super Mario 3D World, I've got that on Switch. Like, there's a Bowser's Castle at the end of the world. Let's try that. And she thought that was cool. But then, and it's like, could I see another Bowser? Like, well, it takes, you got to beat all these other levels first before you get to Bowser. Because, originally I'd played 3D World on Wii U. That's where I had like completed the game.
Right.
But I rebought it because I'm a schmohawk that rebuys all of the games that Nintendo
I gotta say,
puts out.
The Bowser's Fury expansion was definitely. This is one that I haven't picked up yet, but it's one of the more enticing additions to like.
Yes.
Like I talked about Tropical Freeze, and I was like, Funky Kong, like it's like essentially an easy mode
Funky
for like
mode.
Like
Funky
it wasn't
Kong mode.
Like it for me, for what I'm looking for, it wasn't really adding anything new to the game to me. But when you're adding like a whole new kind of like mini campaign to one of my favorite Mario games, like I like 3D Land a little more than World, but I really love both of those games. Kind of back to that corridor style gameplay. I was wondering if you were kind of hinting at that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you also that I like Super Mario 3D Land a little bit more than 3D World, though I like 3D World a lot too.
And I wonder if it's just more like, I wonder if they would have just come out in the opposite order, if I would feel differently. But if because I felt the same way about Galaxy 2, even though everybody was like, oh, Galaxy 2 is better than 1. But I felt like I was just like, it's great, but it's just like, Galaxy 1 blew me away a little bit more. Yeah. And I wonder if I had the same experience here.
That novelty factor. You wonder how much that plays into it, right?
Yeah, like now that I'm running around planets for a second time, it's not as cool this time. I know you got Yoshi's and whatever, there, but it's it was like, not been there, done that, because I still love Galaxy 2, but it just felt like more of the same. Still good, but it was just like, it wasn't as special, I guess.
Yeah, on Galaxy 2, I don't know that I ever did more than about halfway through that game, unfortunately.
I beat it, but I definitely never did all like the green stars or whatever that, the 100%. It was like, oh geez, this is like actually really hard. I'm not messing with that.
No. Yeah, for sure. But I did play Bowser's Fury, because Fiona wanted to see more Bowser. And I'm like, oh, geez, there's this whole mode that they made specifically for this port to the Switch of Super Mario 3D World that has Bowser's Fury. And Bowser's Fury essentially takes that same Mario 3D World / Land engine and but like pulls it out to more of a like the traditional 3D Mario perspective, or it's more zoomed in on Mario, and it feels more like like a Sunshine or Galaxy or, or Odyssey type of perspective when you're playing, as opposed to 3D World is more zoomed out because it's meant to be more of a multiplayer thing, and that whole perspective. So
and it just kind of felt like in 3D World they were like, in a way, like those levels to me felt very, because they kind of had that like corridor type perspective, like it kind of felt like 2D levels but in 3D, sort of like in a way, like maybe just because they were more linear or whatever.
I think that's fair. And again, just like we were saying with Kirby, that's why I like those games a lot.
But you're saying so Bowser's Fury kind of opens that up a little bit.
It opens it up in that, like, you can kind of travel between these different sections, but it's like this open-ended area that you can explore. But each individual like level part is still more corridory than not, I guess. They're like individual little like corridor dioramas, and the idea is Bowser is this like mega Bowser, and he looks awesome, and he's like super on fire and dark, and he's covered in like the goop a la Mario Sunshine goop. Which it's really interesting, like the callbacks to Mario Sunshine and Bowser's Fury, because you're also collecting shines. Which is
weird.
Yeah.
Weird,
lots of carryover between that, which is kind of interesting to me.
Considering they don't really do much with Sunshine.
No.
Ever.
But you wonder too, is it like a nostalgia piece? Is it like, I was thinking about this earlier, is it like how like modern adults that were kids now have nostalgia for like the Star Wars prequels, even though they weren't necessarily that good? And I'm not trying to besmirch Mario Sunshine to say that it's as bad as the Star Wars prequels, but like it's the same sort of thing happening there, right? Where now they're like, oh no, that's a classic Mario
That's
game.
The one that people grew up with.
Yeah, that's their nostalgia now. Like that's the one they may have started with if they're now 20 whatever or 30 years old, So now they're calling back to that a little bit with some of the themes, and like Bowser Jr.'s there too, but Bowser Jr.'s like, what's wrong with Papa? Why is he so mad? So he's helping Mario out this
almost
time.
Almost on your side,
yeah. He's kind of trying to like help you fix Papa by collecting these shines that you're finding, and so Bowser comes up randomly, effectively at times, just kind of as you're playing through these mini levels and collecting shines, and there's a counter of your shines, and as you collect a certain amount of shines, typically like 3 or 5 in an area, they add to a lighthouse, and that turns the lighthouse on, and Bowser hates the lighthouse and goes back into his goop, basically, so that but when Bowser comes up, like everything turns into like a dark evil mode version of all these levels, where the enemies are a little bit more focused on attacking you, and everything's raining and really dark and a little bit more like moody, and it'll even go into like a Bowser fight mode where he's trying to like shoot his fire at you, and you either avoid that. If you collect enough shines, you open up a bell, and then you become this like mega cat lion Mario that can like Godzilla fight this Bowser, because you turn big just like he is, and you have these like massive battles.
Okay, because I feel like, that's most like the promotional stuff that I've seen has been like the massive stuff, and I'm like, I wonder, I really have no idea like what the actual gameplay for this is like.
Yeah, and that's not the bulk of the gameplay. It's fun, but that's not the bulk of it. The bulk of it is just kind of like these, just kind of Mario platforming sections where you're finding secrets, and you're finding, 3 to 5 shines in these given areas, or like individual shines in these like little secret areas that are like in waterways. There's a lot of water a la Mario Sunshine, and like a tropical feel that way too.
Okay. Are there like different
cool like dragon type of I don't even know what that guy's name is, but you could ride him in 3D World as well.
That like dino dragon thing or whatever.
Yeah. So you can ride him around to kind of traverse this open area and find other little secrets and go between the different land masses that have like the shines to collect.
Do all the different like land masses have like their own like kind of theme then?
Yeah.
Like they're all like kind of their own level biome, if you will?
Yeah, they're all their own level. And then even as you're progressing and you hit certain shine amounts and you beat Bowser and he goes back, as you hit certain thresholds, like new land will even creep out of the goo where it wasn't before, and more map opens, right? So it's kind of like opening over time, like as the fog of war is removed by you collecting more shines, and I'm into it. It's fun.
That sounds sweet. Yeah,
it's really, really well done, and it controls really well like a 3D Mario platformer would. And every day when Fiona, I bring her home from daycare, and she's like, "Can we play Bowser?"
Nice.
Like, yeah, hell yeah, we could play.
I
Bowser.
Love that she's like a diehard Bowser fan of all characters.
It's like, oh, Bowser's not making good choices. I'm like, yeah, he's not. He's really upset, isn't he? Yeah. So it's like it's been really fun to play through. I feel like we're relatively close. At least we're like more than halfway through. It feels like.
How big of a campaign? Like, how much of an extra addition to the game? Like, I know I'm assuming it's not like a full blown like another Super Mario 3D world.
No,
attached
not quite,
onto
no,
it, but
no. But it feels like, I don't know. It feels like get it, at least probably close to 10 hours, I would bet.
Dang, that's bigger than I thought. I kind of thought it would just be like, oh, here's like almost like a little bonus area. I wasn't expecting it to be like kind of a full-fledged like kind of mini campaign, if you will.
Yeah, it's somewhere in between that. You know, maybe it doesn't end up being quite that long, but it's certainly been, I feel like, you know, I'm always a little bit more lackadaisical with that, and even especially so with Fiona watching, I'm not trying to go too fast where she can like point out the shines that she sees and, you know, the perspective that we're looking at, you know, that's fun for her. So, you know, it's taking a little bit longer, but, you know, I'd say we've already put in at least 4 or 5 hours, and there's still plenty to do. So it's like, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's really cool that they did that, because historically when Nintendo has ported these Wii U things, they're not adding that much, right? This is a whole new mode.
Yeah, and least. I almost wonder. I think I maybe have even like I maybe read something, or maybe just saw like a tweet or something. But I thought I saw somebody say like, or speculating that like maybe this was like a proof of concept for the next Mario game, or at least some kind of, because it's just like, why would they do this otherwise? Like, because like you said, if they do something like this, it's usually more along the lines of like a new Super Luigi U, where it's like a full like kind of like its own standalone thing. It's like a spin-off. Of that thing, but it's not like just going to get packaged in with like a port. Or they do like kind of more like the Captain Toad style, where it's like, oh, now there's co-op and a few like features that probably should have been in the game from the get-go, or, you know, a few bonus levels here and there, but not like a full blown, like extra. I mean, a 5 or 10 hour campaign, that's a full game as far as I'm concerned. Maybe not a full $60, you know, Nintendo AAA game, but it's definitely enough to justify like it definitely makes me way more interested in. I've always kind of been like, I should get that and new Super Mario Brothers again, just because that I think that one does have like the new Luigi stuff all built into the same cartridge, so I'm just like, I kind of just want to have the final version of those games or whatever.
That's exactly how I feel about it, and it made me feel good about justifying the cost of getting it, especially in this specific case with Super Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury. Like, it's they really put the time and love into it, and like all the enemies are cats. They all have like cat ears and stuff. Like all the Goombas have cat ears, all the Koopa Troopas have cat ears and stuff. And that's
so. Does it lean into that power up pretty heavily as far as the level design goes, or is it just more for like the mega when you turn into like the giant cat Mario?
No, it does. Yeah, the cat power is probably I would say your primary power you'd want to use a lot of times, just for like the verticality of climbing.
It's a sweet power up. It's awesome. It's one of the coolest like new power ups in a Mario game in a long time, especially in a 3D Mario game.
Oh yeah, but you can select between like the traditional fireball or like Tanuki suit or other ones too that you get the power-ups along the way, and it works like a lot of Marios have since Mario 3, where you can kind of bank some of those power-ups, and then, you know, through your D-pad kind of select one as you've gotten hurt or whatever. So it's good. I'm into it, and I'll probably talk about it again once I beat it.
Yeah, you got my interest. I've been kind of like, there's been a few of those Switch games, Captain Toad as well, that I've kind of been like, especially because I think I let John borrow my Wii U version of Captain Toad like years ago, and he still has it, I think. And I'm kind of just like, not that I care that much, and I can obviously, he lives right across the street, I can just go get it from him. But I'm just kind of like, that almost like, I'd rather let him keep that and just use that as an extra excuse to put me over the hump to be like, well, now I gotta rebuy Captain Toad on Switch.
Yep. Captain Toad.
I don't even have it anymore. I love that game.
Game's so good.
And I think that game did add like an extra world. I think that game did add a few extra things too.
Like that. Yeah, that Captain Toad one did for sure. And then if you want a small morsel of that and you hadn't played it already, then you have that in Super Mario 3D World.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, how cool is that they like took that little like kind of bonus like mini game concept from 3D World and said, hey, there's a lot of potential here.
A lot, obviously,
a lot of potential. I really love that game. I have a really fond memory of like completing that like final boss battle, at least in the Wii U version of like, I think it was some kind of like parrot or some, I don't know. No, it was like some kind of fire breathing dragon thing that you're like climbing up the stage and like going up it. I don't know. It just felt really cool. It felt like kind of like those, it kind of feels like almost like, those like Mario Party mini games where you're like playing as a team and like people are triggering switches and like, doing things. It kind of felt like a version of that, like that final boss battle, like you're like running and opening things. Did you ever finish that game, Captain Toad?
No, I that's another one I need to. And it's such like, what a cool concept. Like so many games are like, we're going to empower you. You're going to feel so powerful. Like, no, you're going to play as Toad. You can't jump.
You literally, you can't even jump.
You say, and like you just walk around collecting gems and try not to get hit by things that scare you.
Yeah.
And find secrets.
It's almost like a similar style gameplay to like BOXBOY and BOXGIRL, but like a little bit more, obviously with a 3D perspective and like a little simpler, not so head scratchy on the puzzles and stuff, but
or Pushmo for that matter. Sort of, with the diorama perspective.
Yeah. Nintendo's got the puzzle games down, especially with their kind of like second party developers, whatever. I don't know what you consider HAL or like or Intelligent Systems, like their first party, but they're like, they're not officially Nintendo games.
Can do some more experimental things once in a while.
They're a little more freedom. Heck yeah. But I think we've done more than enough video game chatting and just chatting in general tonight.
Yep.
Nice long session here this evening, but I think we can wrap up the video games chat here. And as always, you can find us on the internet at pursuingpixels.com. We're pretty much everywhere on the internet these days. Like I said, I think I was talking earlier, we're even on TikTok these days.
There you
go. Pretty much wherever you are, we're there somewhere. So, otherwise we will catch you next week. And until then, take care.
Bye-bye.
Another typical flubbed intro or outro from me, but gets the job done.
Nah, you're good.
Yeah, it's definitely fine. I just feel like I was like, I'm starting to repeat myself here, but definitely good. Another good long one here.
Oh,
man.
Yep.
Yeah, got another couple.
For.
Save it for the casts in the pre-roll there.
Yep, easily. I try to make your job as easy as possible.
We got a wrestling themed one in there. We got a N64 themed one in there.
Naturally, of course. Yeah,
which is actually kind of perfect because like that session that we did with me, you, and John last time where we did the double, it's like, okay, we probably won't have a ton of save it for the cast there. At least probably not two worth. Maybe I can get one, but there probably won't be a whole second one. So
no, not when you do a double regular recording or whatever. Yeah.
It's like the second one is the save it for the cast. Essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.